Nigeria's gas-led energy transition is drawing global attention with over $5 million in new investments recorded in 2024, according to the Nigerian Gas Association. Now, the NGA President Akachukwu Nwokedi linked the search to policy reforms under President Bola Tinubu, including executive orders and progress on the AKK gas pipeline. Investments span infrastructure, LNG facilities, and domestic gas projects. And at the 2025 World Gas Conference in Beijing, Nigeria will showcase its progress through a Nigerian pavilion promoting partnerships and opportunities under the decade of gas agenda, positioning gas as key to industrial growth and energy security. This morning, I'm joined by Temitope Kolade, Associate Director, Oil and Gas and Power at Andersen Nigeria. Thank you so much for joining us, Temitope, on the show.
Thanks again for having me. Good morning.
Yeah, good morning to you too. Now, a $5 billion investment from global investors. Does this reflect a robust vote of confidence in Nigeria's gas sector and its energy transition strategy?
Well, thank you for that question. I think we should maybe in a way try to clarify whether the $5 billion is actually coming from outside or elsewhere. If you think about the analysis of the funds that we're looking at that is coming to the country within the oil and gas space, one of the things that that has been reported would be with respect to the acquisitions that we've had around the Renaissance Capital, the investments by the Chapal Group, the Renaissance Consortium, and of course, Wando and separate acquisition of ExxonMobil and Ajib. So really and truly, I think it's very sort of interest and injection of capital, and maybe not necessarily from the foreign place. But again, we can't take it away from the people who are putting all of this monies as to whether they really trust the place where they put in the money. I think, yes, it's some level of trust in the industry from some of the reforms that have been put out there by the current government, from the point of saying, you know what, when it comes to things around the local content, we want some transparency and then we want some speed in terms of execution. And that's one of the things that the policy is trying to do. From the fiscal point of view, also a couple of policies that have been put out there to say, you know what, we want things easier for operators within the sector. So maybe, again, it's some sort of vote of confidence, but we're not fully there yet, but we're getting there, I think.
All right, let's look at the players along the value chain. I mean, what are the targets for these investments in the sector, and how well can these actually stimulate Nigeria's economic growth?
Okay, so along the value chain, what people are looking at is both the downstream and the upstream. And for the upstream in particular, what they want to do is to ensure that if you look at it from a fiscal point of view, gas flaring, it's not allowed, right? And if you have to flare gas in any way, then you're going to be penalized for it. And when you pay that penalty going forward based on the Petroleum Industry Act, you're also not going to get some sort of incentive from the point of deductibility of that expense. And what it then means is that for every company that is within this space, they're then saying, you know what, we want to do, say, 75%. That's what one of the big operators within the sector has said. That's in terms of conversion, in terms of scope 1 emissions going forward, we want to reduce it by 75%, which is really coming from gas flaring. And what that means is that we've got to gather gas. So there will be gas gathering facilities, and down the line, you'd expect that they're able to make the gas available both for the domestic market and of course for the export market. What do we need all of these things to do? Down into CNG, and you've seen what the government is also trying to do in terms of trying to push people to go do auto gas vehicles, for instance, right? And that would help to power these sort of vehicles that run on CNG, for instance. If you also think about the majority of our power, in fact, over 70 or 80% of the power generation in Nigeria runs on gas. And we know that our generation capacity is not just there yet. This is one gap that will also be filled by that. We also have the West African corridor, even to the extreme of maybe going down to Morocco and maybe across the Atlantic. So a lot of value chain right there when we have this gas supply. So in the downstream, for instance, distribution for cooking and all of those are some of the gaps that they're seeing that they would fill by ensuring that we have these gas pipelines put out there.
Now, drawing from what you just said, now the investments seem to signal that Nigeria is actually rising to prominence as a global gas player. But then, amidst carbon emission concerns, does this serve as a bridge fuel towards net zero emissions?
Yes and no, right? I mean, what the SDG says is that in particular, we're looking at climate action, and then we want no poverty. So if you look at it from an holistic point of view, SDG 1 says no poverty, right? Currently, we can say that Nigeria is energy poor, right? Because we're not energy secure. And if we've got to get to where we want to be in Nigeria from the point of reducing poverty, no hunger, and all of those things, we've got to have a transition for. Again, because we can't just jump from 0 to 100, right? Neither can we go from 100 to 0, whichever way you look at it. Yeah, today we've got a lot of diesel powered generators, for instance, and all sort of dirty fuels. So in terms of the emissions that you get from gas, it's about 70% less what you get from fuel or other heavy fuel. So from that point of view, you would find that, yes, it may not be 100% if we go on renewable, but at least we're getting cleaner fuel. And what the government of Nigeria has said is that we're looking at net zero targets 2060. And 2060 for us, maybe it's a decent year if we put all of the relevant parameters into place, and then we begin to work towards it. And by that, we're then saying that, you know what, we're going to have a transition fuel. Gas is going to be a transition fuel. And so we continue to downsize on what we do with respect to other heavy fuels, and then use gas as what we want to, as a stepping stone to then getting into the full renewable sector. So I think it's a decent way to look at it. But of course, we had Vision 2020 and or Vision to the Millennium Vision in itself, and those things were never achieved. So 2060 might look very far, but we're almost there. That's what I would say. We've got to ensure that we're actually driving very close to the goal.
Well, 2060 is just about 35 years away. But then let's look at this. Now, these investments seem to align with the country's ambition to leverage its vast gas reserves to drive industrialization. It's part of the things you mentioned in passing. But then can it reduce Nigeria's reliance on oil, positioning Nigeria as a key contributor to a diverse pool of the global energy markets?
Of course, yes. I mean, I can agree less on that. When it comes to industrialization, this is what we need. And this is one of the things that the government of Nigeria has also been saying during the COP conferences, right? Where, for instance, at the last COP conference, there were debates as to what are we going to do with respect to just transition. Just transition, just saying that, you know what? When we are going to say we want to deal with fossil fuel, and then we want to ensure that we're going cleaner, you must also allow for some industrialization in nations like ours, where we've experienced very little industrialization, if anything at all. Okay. Right? And so gas is one important factor for us. Again, when you look at the fact that about 80% of our power generation that leads to so much of industrialization in any economy that you can think of, right, is supported by gas, right? Gas fire turbines. And so it's very important for us to leverage gas as much as possible to ensure that we are able to generate power. For instance, the last that we celebrated is just about 6 gigawatts that we're celebrating in Nigeria, but in terms of our need, it's over the roof, maybe about 30,000 gigawatts. So again, what we need in terms of generation of power is a lot in Nigeria, and gas will do a lot for us to to achieve that.
Okay,
and that we can then begin to drive towards the sort of transition that we want, and of course the industrialization, achieving both at the same time.
Okay, so let's quickly pause on the conversation for now. We go on a break, and when we return, we'll look at the issues around infrastructure, national assets, pipeline vandalism, and all that that's actually driving down or inhibiting optimal production of this particular commodity. When we go on a break and return, the conversation will continue. Stay with us. Well, on Business Edge, we have been considering the $5 billion investment that the Nigerian government said it was able to secure in 2024 into the gas subsector. And we are looking at how that can actually translate into energy transition and escalation of this particular commodity for more gains. And of course, I'm looking at the renewable initiatives that spans a global discourse. We have been talking to Temitope Kolade, Associate Director, Oil, Gas and Power at Andersen Nigeria. Thank you so much, Temitope, for staying with us. Now, Nigeria still struggles with systemic challenges like pipeline vandalism, regulatory bottlenecks and corruption and all these issues. Now, do you think that these risks that I just mentioned could derail the plan of upscaling Nigeria's gas infrastructure?
Well, vandalism is something that is always posed a very big threat, especially to crude oil, carriage, and of course, petroleum products across the country. But when it comes to gas pipelines, it's a bit more technical, right? And it's important to to set the record straight from the point of how under so much pressure gas is actually transported from one point to the other. So what I'm saying in essence is that it's close to society trying to vandalize gas pipelines, right? And that's not to say that those putting in the investment will not also ensure that they do their due diligence and ensure that so much is done with respect to how the pipes are laid in themselves, and to ensure that it's not self-sabotage that will be reported as though people who would get into perpetrate such vandalism are not maybe state actors. Right, so there could be situations that maybe you'll find some so-called state actors that would involve in that. But other than that, I think it's really close to suicidal for anyone to think that they want to vandalize gas pipelines. So the risk is there, but the risk is not so much if, of course, the operators put in their best input into the work and ensure that they lay the pipes well under the ground.
Okay, still talking about risks, Temitope. Now, while the $5 billion figure is impressive, some analysts express caution about the feasibility and transparency of these investments. So do you think that Nigeria's history of stalled projects, fluctuating global gas prices as we've seen, and competition from other gas-producing nations could hamper sustainability and long-term profitability?
Well, any project within the oil and gas space is really not a short dash kind of race kind of project, right? So again, we've got to look at it from an holistic point of view. What are other countries doing? And in particular, Nigeria has carefully chosen to say, you know what, we are hitting net zero by 2060. We think that by then we would have maximized the resources that we have. We must also bear in mind that Nigeria leads the pack of gas reserves countries in Africa, for instance. So that should count for something, and one of the things it should count for is that we explore it as much as possible within the time when it is still relevant and is still useful and there is a market for it, right? So whatever we're going to do, we've got to ensure that we get all of these resources out of the ground as quickly as possible and maximize the usage. Is there a risk that there could be an obsolescence of technology or the need for these resources at some point? Yes, indeed. And that's really what we need to deal with to ensure that we maximize these resources very early on. For the AKK project, you would agree with me, it's been in the news for as long as many of us have been within this space. So really and truly, there are times that you are worried or bothered about the terms of a project and whether you'll be able to achieve what they set out to do, because it basically crosses political administrations from time to time. But I think that if we have a governing council for some of these projects and we stick to the goal, over time will ensure that things really work, and then we are able to deliver the sort of results that will be beneficiary to everyone in the nation.
Okay, just as we wrap up, Temitope, now how is the private sector responding to this government's gas-led energy transition strategy, and what regulatory challenges would you want to see in order to scale this up further?
Well, I think that generally the private sector is responding well. And like I said earlier, most of the investment that we seem to be talking about are even from the private sector in particular. For the most part, what NNPCL has been trying to do is also to ensure that people are participating within that sector, which is what I think the reason for having a new management of the NNPCL, to ensure that they commercialize and privatize more or less that entity, so that we can really get a capital from the private sector to drive what's needed. But is there more that we expect to see within this sector? I think it's a transparency. I think it's the willpower to ensure that things don't drag for too long. I think the policy documentation that was released by this government in terms of the executive order tends to help to address that, such that there is a timeline to ensuring that certain requests that you make to government gets attended to. Right, but there is the need to ensure that in terms of implementation, it's not just on paper, and we see the SA to the president driving it very closely and ensuring that we don't just put things in paper, but we ensure that in terms of approvals, they come very fast for people who are ready to do.
All right. I mean, we understand that Nigeria will be part of the 2025 World Gas Conference in Beijing, and we hope that they'll be able to use that platform to drive more investment initiatives for growth. Thank you so much, Temitope Kolade, the Associate Director, Oil, Gas and Power at Andersen Nigeria, for talking to us.
Thanks, Stefan.
All right.